Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia. I'll be speaking with you about the Festival of Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, and we're going to use it as a case study in how tradition itself changes. How tradition changes. In the Bible, Shavuot is referred to as a harvest festival, Chag HaKatsir, the festival of the reaping. Specifically, this is the harvesting of the wheat. There's another harvest holiday in the Bible. Actually, there are two other harvest holidays, but the one which comes before Shavuot, 7 weeks before, is the holiday of Pesach, of Passover. The reason for this timing is botanical. Barley reaches maturity faster than wheat. The barley crop in ancient Israel reached harvest-ready stage at around the time of Passover. So Passover was the time when the barley harvest was being celebrated. The day after Passover, the first sheaf of the new crop of barley was presented. This is called the Omer. And 7 weeks later, when the wheat was ready, there was a wheat harvest festival. That was the first stage in the holiday that we call the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot. Now, you'll notice that I've been speaking completely in agricultural terms. If you've seen the famous DeMille movie, The 10 Commandments, you know that there's another connection that we cherish with Shavuot, and that is the anniversary of the time of the giving of the 10 Commandments. And the Bible has an extensive description of that marvelous event. It's described in chapter 19 and 20 of Exodus and the chapters that follow. It's about the time and season that we expect Shavuot to be. But the interesting thing is, when you look closely at the chronology of chapter 19 of Exodus, you have to do some pretty fancy interpreting to get the exact date clear. We're told that on the third new moon from the Exodus, the Israelites encamped facing Mount Sinai. We're told that Moses went up and down the mountain several times and spoke to the Israelites, and they spoke back, and then God spoke as well. But we don't have precise chronological indications in the 19th chapter of Exodus. What happened was, our tradition had more or less decided that the wheat harvest festival was in fact also the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. And so the famous connection was made. Not only is Shavuot Chag HaKatsir, the festival of the reaping, but it is also, to use the language of the rabbis, Ziman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of our Torah. Now, frankly, I just smuggled an idea in, and I should be honest about it. I smuggled in the idea that the time of the receiving of the Torah, the anniversary of that wonderful event, does in fact coincide with the wheat harvest, even though the Torah hints at it but doesn't say so explicitly. This is a clue that we should search after. It tells us that in the circles of the leadership of the Jewish people, the intellectual leadership, there was a desire that the agricultural and that the historical dimensions should coincide. So what's to be gained for doing this? After all, a harvest is itself a good reason to celebrate. We live in a world where some of us have food aplenty, some of us do not. We should all be called upon to do our charitable best to help with food insecurity. And we should all remember that as recently as March, at the beginning of this pandemic, there was some panic buying of groceries. I'll bet if you're listening to me right now that you have some emergency food in your pantry that you bought in March because we were worried about the possible breakdown of food delivery. So food security is a reason to celebrate. And if you're Jewish, celebration starts with an acknowledgement of God. So the question comes back. If a harvest is a decent thing to celebrate, why did our tradition want to marry it up with the historical reminiscence of the giving of the Ten Commandments? The answer to this question really lets us know what is the genius of Judaism, what is the special insight of the Jewish religion. And it has to do with monotheism. Now, many of us know that Judaism is the first of the monotheistic religions, but we err if we think that that's just a matter of arithmetic, one God rather than two or many. In fact, if there's only one God, as Jews believe, that means that God is known in different ways than had once been thought. In the religions of the ancient Near East, which were various kinds of paganism, gods were often identified, and goddesses too, with various forces of nature. Baal, the thunder deity, Ra, the sun god, gods of fertility, gods of the grass, gods of the sweet water, gods of the salt water, gods of the subterranean realms. Every different god, a different realm of nature. When there's only one God, you could simply say that all of nature is a testimonial to God, and the Bible does do that, but then it says something else. It says you can also look for the fingerprints of God's activity in human affairs. And this is a very different kind of a proposition. God makes us. We believe that God wants us to treat each other in certain ways, and therefore history matters, because history is when people have either obeyed or disobeyed God's will. Shavuot, coming at the same interval of time, the wheat harvest, that is to say, coming at the same interval of time after the barley harvest, as the Torah suggests the giving of the Ten Commandments came after the Exodus, is a wonderful opportunity for us to reflect upon the fact that our identity as a people is involved in an experiment. The experiment is to live, to treat your neighbor, and to create a society that can obey what God wants each of us to do. And that is to live with respect and with love for each other. Happy holiday. Chag Sameach.